Hello, everyone. Hello, Liz. How are we doing today?
Hi, good. How are you?
I am doing well. Welcome, everyone. It is that crazy time in the year where it's like that weird in between. Like it's like the holidays for those who celebrate it. It's the New Year. It's just that eerie like mid time right now.
Yeah, it's this like yearly wrap up where things are slow, but they're also chaotic and busy, and you're not sure what's happening.
That's a perfect way to say it. It's like that in between time where it's like it should be quiet. You expect it to be quiet, but it's actually kind of hectic. But it is what it is. So how are you doing? How are you feeling about today's live?
Everything's good. I'm feeling good. I was just pulling up the questions, excited to hop in because I know we have a lot. And I'm excited about us kind of wrapping up the year. It's weird to say that we're already doing that, but just to kind of be at a place where we're gonna. I don't think we have a live stream next week, do we?
No, we're doing a big holiday one with everyone,
No.
but we're not doing our own. So we
When is
won't.
the holiday one?
I will pull it up. I
There,
believe.
6 p.m. Central, so 7 p.m. on Wednesday, the 28th. So next Wednesday, we'll be doing our holiday live stream with all of us, but this will be our last Ask the Experts. So I'm excited because my goal for today, Chris, is that we can go through a ton of questions, but also that we can kind of come back to wrapping up on like lessons learned and what we feel like are the takeaways for the year.
I like that.
So let's jump in. So welcome, like everybody. Please let us know who you are, where you're joining from. You can always put comments in that right-hand pane that you'll see over there. We're so excited to be here with you guys today and hopefully share some insight, information, and provide some resources that will continue to instill hope in your life. As always, we are not intended to be your therapists or to be your clinicians, and we should not be the people that you reach out to if you're feeling like you are in distress or crisis. If you're feeling unsafe or suicidal, we ask that you call 911 or go to your local emergency room. We are really here to provide education and support, and we hope that you'll use us in that way. And we hope more than anything that we will be able to provide that to you in a way that's helpful. One of the stories I always hear, Chris, or I hear from you actually, and from Ethan and others, is these stories of individuals who found IOCDF, and when you did, it was the first step to finding good treatment. The IOCDF and individuals within the organization helped point you and helped you understand what treatment was best for you and what it looked like to be able to get that and what it would look like to have success or freedom. So that's our goal. Our goal through these live streams is that we can help be a guiding light to getting you to where you need to be or should be in your life. And what that really means at the end of the day is we're fighting for freedom from OCD. And so we want to do whatever we can to help get you closer and closer to that. So I'm hopeful that these live streams have been able to do that this year. And I hope that today's we'll kind of wrap some things up and share some insight. So I want to start, Chris, with, what do you feel like is the overarching thing or theme or topic that has been really important that we've covered this year? So if you were really to say like, okay, if I could pick one thing that everyone takes out of these live streams or that they take home out of 2022 for us with the foundation, what would that be?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing that I always take away is I hear a lot of fear sometimes in the people that are on the live streams, and I get it. I mean, I know you get it too, Liz. I think that and I wanted to talk to you about this off camera, but I'm going to bring it up in front of you now, a talk that I'd love to do at the conference. I think, I was running the family group that I help run each second Saturday, and somebody said to me that their kid did not want to get treatment because they didn't want to go around licking toilets in public restrooms. And I told the mom, I was like, I've worked in the OCD field since 2009, and I've never had somebody go around and lick public restroom toilets. And they're like, well, that's what they got from the treatment online. And I think I've seen that in some of our questions and some of our comments of this idea that, I'll never forget when we had that conversation on one of our lives that ERP is not fear factor. And ever since then, I've thought, ERP, like you said, was such a gift for me. It got my life back. It got me from death's door. It got me from isolation to being to where I'm at today. And so anytime people are scared of it or don't want to do it or haven't tried it, it's frustrating because I'm like, but this thing is magical. It's given me my life back. It's been great. It's been evolved. And so I think that's the big arching thing that I want everyone to know is get help. I promise you, promise you, promise you, none of us that get help and are doing better ever look back and say, man, I really wish I could go back to before treatment and before having a diagnosis and living under OCD's grip, and reminding yourself that what the treatment's really asking you to do is to re-engage in life, to go back to the things that you care about and mean to you the most, and to really push through all the noise and the nonsense that OCD tells you, to really get to a point where you're like, you know what, I don't need to spend all my time physically and mentally getting answers. I can just live. So I want people to know that is that ERP is not licking public toilet seats. It's actually much bigger, much more complex, and much more great than that. So I hope that's what people get, is get help. IOCDF has a search feature to find someone in your area.
Absolutely. And if you were to ask me the same question, it's really, I want to make sure that we know that freedom from OCD is possible. And I think a lot of you probably listening right now are sitting there saying, Liz, you say that, but I don't really think I can have freedom. I think I can learn to function and like struggle through my symptoms. And to me, that would be good enough. That is the message I want to send this year, is that we are not settling for functioning. We are fighting for freedom. And we can achieve that with appropriate treatment. When you actually lean into ERP, when you embrace treatment the way we need to, freedom is possible. And I want to make sure we know that, because I spent many years of my life not believing that, not buying into that. And so in turn, I was actually kind of half in, half out when it came to treatment. And my outcomes were half and half as well, right? They weren't 100% because I wasn't giving it 100%. I wasn't willing to fully commit or to fully give in the way I needed to. And so I really want to push that that's what we need to be doing, and that's what we're fighting for. And our goal is to help teach you how to do that, to help give some advice and to give some feedback along the way. So let's start with questions that have been submitted, and then we'll hop into some pre-submitted along the way that come as well. So the first question, Amanda, is at 11:03 a.m. What are your tips on sudden real event guilt? Any things that have helped you specifically with emotions around guilt and shame? Chris, I'll let you take this one.
Yeah, I actually did a couple talks of that at the online conference. I'm not sure if people are able to still register and catch the recordings, but there's 2 talks that I did about guilt and about shame. And then I believe there was a talk, because I saw it when I was looking through the different talks to watch back, on specific real event guilt. So always remember, we have these great conferences and resources at the IOCDF. But here's the thing. I'm glad you're asking this question, because I think people only think of anxiety as the distressing emotions, but we have way more emotions that we experience outside of just anxiety, including guilt and shame. And I think one of the first steps I'll give, and I think, then Liz can jump in and kind of, finish off. But I think the first thing is, part of the thing that helped me and helps clients is separating ourselves from the disorder and really understanding how the disorder talks to us and gets us to believe some of the lies that it tells. So if we stop recognizing that OCD is a disorder that, gives us these intrusive thoughts and these unwanted feelings, we're going to own them. So if there's an event that happened in the past for you and you're owning that guilt, you're owning that shame, you're punishing yourself, you're in your head constantly trying to get clarity, now you're in this very tight wound OCD cycle where that guilt is driving the need for clarity. The need for clarity is coming up short. Then you're feeling guilt. Then you're feeling punishment, etc. And when I work with clients like this, they've never done anything bad, and they're amazing people. So you got to really separate yourself from the disorder and not own those negative feelings that you're experiencing. I know they're powerful, but I always remind clients, you can be tired on the freeway and not immediately go to sleep. You can be hungry and not immediately run and get food. We can have emotions, but choose not to react to them, and that's the power.
Love that. Next question is at 11:05 a.m. from Jessica. It seems that my brain works too fast. I can't even differentiate between thoughts and compulsions sometimes. I don't know when I'm doing stuff because I want it or if I'm seeking relief from anxiety. Chris, I'll share my thoughts, but I'd love for you as well. But Jessica, for me, it's really about, are we responding urgently? Anxiety and OCD makes us respond urgently right away. And it often doesn't let us say something like, oh, I'll deal with that later, or I'll address that later. It's this need of like, I have to figure this out and I have to figure it out now, right? It's this like urgent need to understand, to respond, to solve. The second piece I always tell people is that if we're not sure if it's anxiety or OCD, it's probably anxiety or OCD. We often know when it isn't. And so I want you to lean into that as well.
Yeah, what I would add is I think when you say it's hard for you to differentiate the thoughts and the compulsions. I always remind people the O and OCD is not a long process. If I walk into a building, like I had OCD around chemical cleaning, if I walk into a restaurant and I see people are cleaning off the tables with a chemical, the O is pretty immediate. The obsession immediately jumps in and says they're spraying chemicals, you're going to breathe it in, it's going to be on the food, and you're going to get sick. And along with that, oh, unfortunately, comes his sidekick, right? Those feelings of like uncertainty. My gut is starting to feel anxious. I'm starting to feel dysregulated. That's OCD's doing, and I can't control it. That's the O. How I choose to respond that is immediately how the O turns into the C. So if I bolt from the restaurant, if I ask to sit on the very other side of the corner, if I hold my breath, if I try to remember what I read off the internet about cleaning chemicals, if I ask them if it's safe, that then becomes the C. And just like Liz said, is like that's our powers to choose not to jump into it right away. So if you're noticing your triggers and you're noticing those situations are causing you to feel dysregulated, if you immediately jump into the urgency, that's OCD's trap. You're at the kind of peak of your anxiety and you're more likely to give into a compulsion. So, like Liz said, breathe, take a second, don't react right away, because typically our immediate response is going to be compulsive.
That's right. Next question. Is OCD a condition you can be cured from and it be non-existent in your life, or are you in recovery or required in it, or recovered and it has to be kept on top of?
Yeah, great question. I think sometimes people feel I never want people to feel discouraged. I think Liz has made a big point of this, and all of our advocates. I never want people to feel discouraged when you don't hear cure. And the reason we can't say there's a cure is because when we think of cure, it's literally like I don't even know what we can cure, right? But because there's things like cancer, it comes back, et cetera. But a cure would be like you have something and then you take a pill or you do something and it's like gone forever, right? And like a lot of things can't be cured. People who deal with substance abuse disorder are in recovery. People with depression are in recovery. So the good news is it's not like OCD is the only disorder that doesn't have a cure. But what I always tell people is typically when you're dealing with severe OCD, 95, 98, 99% of your life is dedicated to OCD and discomfort and things you don't want to do. And you rarely have any, percentage left for your own. When you're at a point where Liz, myself, Ethan, all of our different advocates that you hear from, it's flip-flopped. Like 2 to 3% of our lives may be OCD, where 97% is just living. And I always joke to my clients when they ask me this question, if I still suffer, I'm like, I hate taxes and traffic and people that can't figure out what they want to order in line. So then they take an hour once they get to the front counter, more than I hate the OCD in my life. So we get to a point where recovery, it doesn't feel like you have OCD and are struggling. The last thing I'll say, and then I want Liz to jump in, is when people ask me what my definition of recovery is, I don't think it's all the same for everyone, but mine is where the majority of your decisions on a daily basis are made out of values, goals, interests, passions, etc., and not out of OCD fear.
Totally. I think that the big thing I always want to say is like, one of the things that we think about when we think about OCD criteria is that typically you have to be engaging in obsessions or compulsions for an hour a day. And there's many of us who no longer would meet criteria. So one of the things I loved, actually, Shannon Shai said this on a talk that we did at a live stream probably 6 months ago or so, but sometime this year. You know what we should try to do, Chris, is like put together a
Highlight reel.
Of all of the favorite things that people said, because I know a lot of us have like things that stuck out in our mind around statements or sayings that were said. But anyway, one of the things Shannon said that I love is he said, listen, you don't have to call it a cure, you don't have to call it recovered. I don't really care what you call it, but the way I feel is that I have no fear anymore in my life around anything OCD is going to try to throw at me, or around any OCD themes or topics. And I just loved that, because I thought, okay, that is really where we want you to be. I want you to be at a place where you don't have there's no part of you that's like, oh, I still can't think about that, or I can't go there, or I can't touch this. It's like, no, like fear drives none of my decisions anymore. I drive all of my decisions in my life. And really, like, OCD doesn't make choices. Does that mean I never have OCD try to jump in or try to pull me down? Of course not. Like, I still get triggered sometimes, and I still have times that anxiety or OCD wins on occasion. But really, overall, I get to live my life the way I want to live my life versus the way OCD wants me to live it. And that's the big difference.
Well said.
To answer the question 1106, unless you have anything different, Chris, I don't know if GERD or acid reflux is common with chronic OCD. I've never really heard a lot about new research in that area.
Yeah, you know what? My mom. So we did a talk at the online conference about wellness, and so my mom's a registered dietitian and works a lot with like issues because she works at a hospital, and she did some research on this because I told her so many people ask this question, and what the research shows is because there's so much serotonin in our gut, and because OCD works and anxiety works with serotonin, that a lot of people can experience stomach-based discomfort. It can be GERD, it can be acid reflux, it can be irritable bowel syndrome and stuff. The good thing is, from what her research said, I'm kind of paraphrasing my mom, who's the expert. She's been doing this forever. So please, this is something maybe we can get somebody on to answer. But from our talk, which I would highly recommend people watch it back if this is a question of theirs. The good thing is a lot of times it can be reversible once people get the treatment. It can help, but we do put a lot of strain on our gut and our digestion system. One thing that I learned from a really good talk on anxiety is that our body takes about 22% of its energy for digestion, and that gets shut down during high panic and anxiety to distribute that energy elsewhere. So if you think about squeezing a hose, pulling it, squeezing it, pulling it, squeezing it, pulling it, your intestines are kind of doing that every time you're going through that OCD cycle. So it can cause stomach issues. What my mom's suggestion was, and what I would suggest strongly, is to see a doctor that works in that and just explain your situation and see if there's something for your specific condition they can help with. But watch that talk back.
Sorry, I'm sorting through things that you've already answered versus not.
I'm gonna put, if Amanda, you could put your email real quick. I see I'm gonna put my email real quick. If Amanda could put it up, there's a comment about somebody calling me, and I don't really give my public number out, so I'm not sure what you mean by that, Delias. But if you could just pass on my email and have your friend email me, I think that'd be better.
Perfect.
That's at 12:06.
Still going through. Matt B at 11:08 a.m. My question is, how would you open up about this subtype of OCD with your family? It's a big burden to carry. So it sounds like the subtype that Matt B is talking about, Chris, is visual and Tourettic OCD that started about 2 weeks ago. Or sorry, he started treatment 2 weeks ago, but that subtype.
Oh yeah, I see the comment that, yeah, I gave him advice because unfortunately I dealt with that, and also Jonathan Greason's done some really good stuff on this, and it was a cool conversation. Yeah, so here's what, and I'd love to get Liz's opinion as well. What I always tell people is I wish we could all be loud and proud about our subtypes and scream them from the rooftop, but I know Liz can talk more personally about it because she had experience on public television, unfortunately, opening up about a subtype that was misunderstood by the host. I think because of stigma around certain stuff, we want to make sure that we trust the people that we open up to and share. And remember, it can always be a level and a process. And so Matt, I was talking to Matt, I had this a lot, and a lot of people have this, and John Grayson has talked about it, where we stare at parts of people's bodies that are embarrassing. So sometimes opening up to loved ones can be difficult, especially if they don't understand the disorder. So Matt, what I would suggest is opening up to the family that you trust first, and do it in layers. Remember, you can share as much or as little as possible. So what I did for people about some of my subtypes, like harm and incest and things that I was more embarrassed about, is I told family that I trusted, and I just like tested the waters. I was like, oh, I just have these really taboo thoughts around certain family members. If somebody reacted pretty poorly, like, what do you mean? I didn't go further. For the people that understood OCD, took the time to get it, and didn't react poorly, then I started to drop a little bit more and a little bit more until I could be fully open. So I think the big thing is you don't have to open up about everything for people to get it, and you can pick and choose which family. You can go at a pace that you're comfortable with. So I think that way. Last, what I'll say is, one strong thing I suggest is figure out a way that your family member intakes information. Is it through podcasts, articles, YouTube videos, etc., and then share something clinical from the IOCDF that explains your subtype, so that way they can see that it's like scientific, it's evidence-based, it's a lot of people deal with that, and then sometimes it's easier to talk about your personal experience.
Yeah, I always tell people that, I always talk about how if you're at the grocery store and the cashier asks you how you're doing, they don't really want you to go into the depths of your life story. If you're on a first date, it really wouldn't make sense for you to share your deepest, darkest details about some of your intrusive thoughts. But what you do is you really start to test comfort, safety, trust, right? So you will share a little bit, right? So I might share a little bit of information and see how you respond and kind of what you say. And that allows me to feel comfortable or safe sharing more. What I will say is that, I think it's really important that we really start to destigmatize OCD across the board. And we see this all the time with individuals where we'll destigmatize it a little bit, but then we're afraid of, a little bit more. And so it is really important to kind of think about, how do I share things in a way that makes sense, but then we're going to feel more comfortable if people make us feel comfortable. So, it's important that, like, if you notice somebody having a stigma, when you start to share kind of more basic, it might not make sense that you become more vulnerable with them and share more details. Instead, I would encourage them to kind of engage in education and learn more about OCD that way, so that you don't have to go into the details with them if you don't feel comfortable. But people should make you feel comfortable, that it shouldn't feel as scary to disclose the subtypes.
Well said. And it's always going to be us opening up and sharing to loved ones and people that really help spread the message. I think we've all been waiting for like that one person to come along and educate the world, but I really believe it's going to take all of us kind of educating those around us.
Totally. So I love, Chris, by the way, my mouse has died, so I can't scroll down on the questions. So you're going to have to go.
Perfect. I'll take it over.
At how many people we have outside of the US. I'm just like watching comments come in. I can only see some, but from Sweden, from all over. And I love it. It makes my heart so happy. I'm sad that it's probably in the middle of the night for y'all. And I'm sorry that you're having to, listen to us from your bed, but it's so exciting to see the reach this is having.
Yeah, I want to let everybody know that's international. Like, we really think of you when we plan this, because I know a lot of people have said like they want to go to the town halls and the evening stuff. But for you all internationally, that's at like 4, 5, 6 in the morning. So I know a lot of people have messaged me that they like the live streams at the time that it is, because it's evening, afternoon, and they can catch it. So I just want everybody to know the International OCD Foundation is taken seriously, and we'd love you all. And Liz and I are secretly hoping that we can all visit every country that you guys are in, because we want to travel.
IOCDF should send us to Sweden and send us to places y'all are at, so that Chris and I can meet you in person.
Exactly. I like that. We're gonna pull some strings. At 12:09, Moonchild on YouTube asks, how do people handle OCD who are afraid of OCD? So I think we can maybe answer it in two ways. Like, how do you open up to people that might misunderstand it? Or how do people get treatment if they're really afraid of it? They're in a big panic place with that.
Yeah. So, for me across the board, whether I'm talking to people I love, or I'm talking to employers, or I'm talking to other individuals with OCD, we have to start with education. We really have to start with appropriate education that will destigmatize OCD in general, because we're using effective language, we're talking about the disorder as it is, and we're actually taking ourselves out of it. And we're making it much more about, this is the diagnosis, this is the disorder, this is what OCD is, this is how it impacts people, this is the way it displays within their life and causes all of this distress and, different disruption. I always like to start there versus my OCD and what happens to me, because then, and what I'll do is I'll kind of share education. And then if someone will say something like, well, Liz, tell me a little bit about, or are you willing to tell me a little bit about some of your own OCD or some of your own struggles? Then it's like, okay, now I know they're interested and they want to learn a little bit more, and I'm more comfortable now to share more about some of my specific details. If it's that you're afraid of OCD treatment, it's actually the same thing. I want to start with education. I want to educate you or someone else about treatment, what it looks like, what to expect, the fact that it works, the fact that it can get your life back, the fact that it isn't fear factor, right? All of these things we're talking about is all in an effort to decrease the fear around either OCD or OCD treatment, because they're actually all hand in hand. I'm going to be really scared of having OCD and not want to have it if I don't know that there's treatment available for me that works. And, I'm not going to believe treatment works if I haven't been to someone who understands how to appropriately treat OCD, right? So there's like, everything we do is actually all in this effort to help increase the understanding of what OCD actually is, and to make sure individuals with OCD or that support somebody with OCD know that there's effective treatment for individuals living with OCD.
Yeah, well said. And I always say the biggest thing is part of the reason that we're so afraid of OCD is because we've given into it so long. Once we start fighting back against the OCD, we really start to see, wait a second, I do have a lot more power than I think. And I think for me, like once I got the reins of treatment, I would tell myself sometimes like, no, we're setting some rules. We're not throwing items away or we're not going to holidays and stuff. So I know we can all be afraid of our OCD, but always remember like we have more power than we think. I'm going to I'm going to propose a pre-submitted question. It says, how do you work on challenging compulsions regarding exercise? I am struggling with compulsions while working out and value the concept of challenging compulsions. However, my compulsions are getting in the way of training and helping others to train. So, what should someone do if their compulsions are getting in the way of exercising?
Yeah, I think the question would be, what are the compulsions, right? So if the compulsions are things like feeling triggered by what you're touching and feeling like you have to clean the item or you have to go wash your hands, it's really about continuing to exercise and not engaging in compulsions, right? So remember, OCD always targets the things that are important to us. So if exercising is important to you, it's an outlet, it's something you enjoy, OCD is going to try to ruin that. It's going to try to impact exercise. It's going to try to take the joy or pleasure that you find in it away, or at least disrupt it. And so we want to do the opposite of what OCD wants us to do. OCD wants us to clean. We purposely want to not clean. OCD wants us to avoid. We purposely want to not avoid, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, really well said. And I always think going back to values, it's like if you are finding yourself struggling to be motivated, remind yourself that it sounds like exercising and training others is a passion of yours. The OCD is in no way ever going to support that. So use that as motivation to really push through so that you can have, kind of grab back what's important to you. Another question that we had pre-submitted is it possible for OCD to be treated without medication and only with ERP CBT therapy?
Absolutely. It's not often the first line treatment is a combination of medication and ERP. And so I always tell people, if I have someone who says, Liz, I don't want to take medication, I really want to do ERP alone, my answer is always like, okay, like happy to start there and let's give it a try. But can you please just agree to be open minded, that you'd be willing to consider medication, right? Because what I don't want it to be is someone to say ERP doesn't work for me, when really it's because they really may have needed some extra support that maybe they could have gotten through medication to help them be at a place where they were willing or able to engage in ERP. And so the short answer is no, medication is definitely not required. And a lot of people actually may want to get off their medication. A lot of people may want to not have to take medication and engage in ERP. So it's not a requirement. ERP, CBT based treatment for OCD, the specific form, is a requirement. Whether you're on medication or not, you have to engage in ERP oftentimes to get better, right? ERP is kind of the core treatment that we use for OCD, whether or not you're on medication.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I work with clients that don't take any medication at all and they find themselves getting a lot better. I will say if somebody is really, really um, wholeheartedly believing their intrusive thoughts, they don't really want to challenge it, they're really high on the Y box, they're very severe, then I absolutely recommend at least just getting a medication consultation to just answer any of your fear-based questions to see if it's something that can work for you. But plenty of people get better. One thing I'd also say is sometimes psychiatrists or medication providers do not recommend or do not ever bring up behavioral therapy. So sometimes you have to bring it up if you want to do it in conjunction. All right, we have a question from Delias at 12:15. It says, "Can you still feel fear and anxiety, but not let it interfere with your life, or is there a way to eliminate the habitual emotional response as well through acceptance and other tools?" So basically, the question is asking Liz is like, can you still function if you're experiencing some anxiety, or is the goal to eliminate any kind of anxiety through the treatment?
Yeah, it's interesting because I actually think the answer is like yes to both of these, right? So I hear like you saying, can you still fear anxiety and not let it interfere with your life or feel it? Yeah, absolutely, right? And this is life in general, you guys, right? So whether you have OCD or not, anxiety is something people deal with. So if I get a phone call or a text message or an email, let's just say from my boss, that's like, hey, I need to discuss something with you, I'm probably going to feel a little anxious, right? I might like automatically feel a little bit anxious. My heart's racing, but I could still choose to do my work for the day, to set a meeting with my boss, to live my life the way I want until I go have that meeting. And it may be no big deal. It may be a big deal. Who knows? but I could still choose to live my life while I'm waiting. And actually what will happen is if I still do my work, go to lunch with coworkers, while maybe in the back of my mind, it will actually become less distressing than if I sit there and ruminate on it and I just email my boss and I say, let's meet right now. And I call him and I try to figure it out. And I let that panic really take over because I'm responding to that instead of responding to life. Is there a way to eliminate the habitual emotional response as well? I guess that when I say yes, what I mean is that like, as you do this work, the emotional response should change, right? So we should see that like, as we no longer are responding to OCD or anxiety as if it's dangerous, as if there's something we need to be afraid of, as if we need to respond, the emotional response should also shift. The emotional response should also change, right? So our emotional response is really heightened because we are acting as if it needs to be, right? Because we're in danger. There's this thing that has to be figured out. There's this urgent situation happening. When we quit responding as if it's urgent, the emotional response also will change, right? Because it won't have that urgent feel, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I always think a powerful thing is to learn to like let anxiety be with you. I mean, I think when I ask a lot of times when I start an intensive outpatient program with a client and I'll ask them, what are your treatment goals? One of the things that they say is, I want to eliminate any anxiety. And I'll say, unfortunately, everybody has anxiety. But the difference is like people learn to live with the anxiety and kind of bring it along and still do really well. So, for example, if somebody has to interview for a brand new job, even if they don't have OCD, they're going to have some anxiety. And if somebody doesn't learn how to tolerate the presence of anxiety in everyday functioning, they're going to completely quit or drop, any kind of ambition to get a better job because they're going to be so in fear of that job interview. But if people learn to tolerate the anxiety and bring it with them and say, okay, I'm feeling some anxiety because this is something that is causing me to feel some angst because it's different, it's a little bit difficult, and they still pursue, they're going to start to learn like, wait a second, I do good at job interviews and I'm getting the jobs I like. So don't feel that you have to be in an absence of anxiety to function. But I will say, for a lot of individuals, myself included, certain things that used to cause us anxiety and trigger us don't anymore. There's plenty of things that I do on a daily basis that don't even register. So I think that's important. There's a couple good questions. So I'll start with Delane at 1231. Is there a correlation of PTSD and OCD? So that's at 1231 for Delaney on Facebook.
Yeah, absolutely there is. So what we know is that individuals with PTSD have a higher incidence rate of also having OCD. It changes to about 5 or more % compared to the general population. Individuals without PTSD, it's closer to about 3% for having OCD. So we know that they're often comorbid, and we know that a lot of individuals, again, with PTSD may develop OCD. And there has been some studies done on that, and IOCDF has done, we've actually done some webinars on PTSD and OCD. So we do know that there's a relationship. What we also know is that if someone's living with PTSD and OCD, the PTSD either needs to, I would say, my thoughts are either needs to be treated first or at least in conjunction with OCD. We would not want to treat OCD alone first and then treat PTSD later. The reason for this is that when you think about the treatment of OCD, we're doing a lot of uncertainty work, a lot of kind of leaning in, approaching our fears. We don't want to be re-triggering PTSD, and we don't want to approach PTSD with uncertainty. There are specific evidence-based treatments for PTSD that include cognitive processing therapy, CPT, or prolonged exposure, PE, and now there's some research and evidence about EMDR. So we really want to be, doing them in conjunction or PTSD first. There are many clinicians at my clinic and at others that specialize in both PTSD and OCD.
Yeah, and I would suggest like working with a clinician that knows both, or sometimes if you can't find a clinician that treats both, because sometimes I've had clients come to me who are working with a therapist that has been working with their PTSD really effectively, and they don't want to change that therapist, so we'll work in conjunction as a team. There's a good question from Badhan H at 1231 from YouTube. Long story short, because they had written some other comments, they had taken a personality test. I think it was the Myers-Briggs. They landed as an INTP type, and now they're having a little bit of obsessions because that type is more for engineering and isn't really specifically for Their dream, I believe, is to be a researcher. They want to be a researcher. So they're having kind of this intrusive thought that, oh, I didn't land on the personality type that I want. I can't have a job. How do you handle thoughts like that? And we can kind of like make it bigger. I think sometimes like when we have OCD, we read something online or we do something, and then suddenly our brain tells us, well, because of that, we can't do this, we can't do that. And we can start to believe those things as facts. So how do we get to a point that we don't have one experience and let it just kind of blind like things that we choose to do or not do?
So this is where I love kind of using examples to describe OCD. So I'm going to use this one. So if you didn't know, would you be worried about it? If the answer is probably not, then it's OCD. And this goes across the board. So, okay, well, like, I have no idea what my personality inventory might say. Maybe it would say I'd be a terrible clinician and I don't have great soft skills or people skills, right? And so, but like, because I don't know that, I don't have any reason to believe otherwise. And therefore, also my OCD isn't going to latch onto it. But if before you did this test, you were excited and hopeful and looking forward to a career in this, you don't let something like that derail it or change it. The second piece is I want you guys to think a little bit about this in the context of OCD. How many times have those of us with OCD said things to ourselves like, well, I wish you wouldn't have told me that. Or I wish I didn't know that. Or like, oh, well, now that I know it, I have to do all these rituals and it's exhausting and we get upset about it. Knowing it didn't really change anything, actually, right? So whether I see that Chris has a Band-Aid and that triggers me or I don't see it, that doesn't change whether or not he has a Band-Aid, right? Like he may or may not, like my barista makes my coffee, I grab it from the drive-thru. There may have been someone with a Band-Aid that touched it, but for some reason, only if I see the Band-Aid on someone, then it's triggering and then it's like, oh, now there's a risk. Well, if there was a risk, the risk is there regardless because you don't know for sure everything that ever happens, right? I don't see, if I see someone with a Band-Aid at a restaurant, it might trigger me, but I don't know that none of the chefs or cooks in the back didn't have a Band-Aid on, but I'm able to be like, oh, but like I didn't know about that, so it's okay. If not knowing is what makes it not triggering, it's probably OCD, you guys. If there's a real risk, or if something is like truly valid, it would be there with or without knowing some new little piece of information, right? For the most part, I mean, obviously within reason, but I want us to think about that. If we're able to say, well, if I didn't know, I would still do something a different way, maybe OCD.
I agree. I don't have anything to add. I mean, I think that's the bummer about OCD is sometimes we'll get something in our head, like you said, the Band-Aid, and then we invent a story. All the time I'll tell clients, I'm like, you're inventing a story again, because if we go to Chipotle and I'll use Starbucks like you did, and we're doing an exposure there, and they're like, oh, I think I saw some red on that person's arm. And then suddenly they're inventing that worker has blood. And then of course, if my client's fear is HIV, that worker must have HIV. And then that blood is getting in the drink. And then I'm drinking HIV. And I know I can't get HIV that way, but there might be a chance. And it would just be safer to not drink the drink. And it's like, whoa, do you see how your brain just kept going on and on and on and on and on? It's like, so don't let your brain invent stories. I always tell people. We have, I wanted to just do a quick shout out for future live streams. So 2 of the pre-submitted questions, I don't want people to ever think we ignore them. One was specifically on diet and how that may or may not help OCD. So I put that we're going to be doing in February, we're going to be doing a live stream on OCD and eating disorders for our Lunch and Learn. So it's the last Wednesday of February. I believe it's the 22nd off the top of my head, but don't quote me. It's the last Wednesday. So I put that question for our registered dietitian that's coming on. Any questions about GERD, about gut stuff, anything like that a registered dietitian can answer, we're going to have one on in February. So please come to that. And then we had another medication question pre-submitted. So that question is going to go into our January. We're going to do an Ask the Experts in January. We're still locking down the date. It might either be the 1st or the 3rd Wednesday of the month. And they're going to come on and answer medication-based questions. So we'll have that medication question for them. So if you were one of the people that pre-submitted a diet or a medication question, it's not that Liz and I are ignoring it. We're just going to have some experts that specialize on that. We want them to be there. All right, the next question was a pre-submitted one. It says, I've been unable to get my OCD to a level that allows me to live a normal life despite years of ERP therapy. This person's 37. They've also done extensive inpatient care. Is there any other methods of treatment that we can recommend for someone that's tried that?
Definitely. I think that the important piece I always want to hone in is that there's never a last resort in treatment, and there's always ways we can do different augmentations, I guess we could call it, right, of treatment and of what we're doing. And so I want you to think a little bit. One of my questions I'd want to ask is, when you did ERB, goodness gracious, when you did ERP, did you embrace ERP? Did you do it fully? Did you lean in, or were you holding on? If you were holding on, I want you to think about what may have been some of those reasons. Were there any reasons that you were holding on that need to be addressed? What's the why? So if I were to ask you, why hasn't ERP worked? Why hasn't treatment worked to date? I'd love to hear that answer, because that will help us to understand what, as clinicians, what may be needed next. And that's what I want you to talk to your clinician about. I also always want us to think about comorbidities. Do we have any other diagnoses going on? Is there anything else that might be interfering with our ability to engage in OCD treatment appropriately that also needs to be addressed? Alec Pollard talks a lot about what we call TIBs, treatment interfering behaviors. So are there any treatment interfering behaviors that are preventing you from being able to do ERP the way that we would need someone to do ERP for there to be the outcomes you want?
Yeah, what I'll do, instead of answering this question, there was a comment at 12:30 from Ken Baker that says, "I don't believe in ERP," and I'm glad you made that comment, Ken. Like, Liz and I didn't invent ERP, so we're obviously not ever angry if someone feels that way. But I think it does create a robust, conversation. And so, once again, kind of Liz had asked me, like, what is one thing that I want us to take from that live stream? And your comment at 12:30 is one thing that I think a lot of people, when they've looked up ERP, they see a very archaic model, right? Like, you're going in session 1 or 2, you're having a therapist have you touch and lick doorknobs and lick the bottom of your shoe and lick toilet seats. And I think that people get that bad rap. But a lot of therapists now are incorporating acceptance commitment therapy, mindful based interventions. We're doing it at a pace that works for you. It's collaborative. We're wanting people to learn from the treatment. We're having people step into uncertainty and learn to kind of move on and live life without trying to get answers. And so ERP can seem scary, because if somebody isn't really familiar with it or understands it, that's why I think what I'm trying to figure out how to do before the conference, Liz, is like role play or record it, what some ERP would look like, so people can really understand it. So the one that I always go back to is, I was working with a client who had gone to different treatment providers, didn't have a good experience. He admitted that he was going through his insurance, so he's seeing therapists that weren't really seeing a majority of clients' OCD, who might have gotten some ERP training, and they had pedophilia OCD. And a lot of their exposures were sitting there writing statements, "I'm a pedophile, I like to touch children," things like that. It was looking up at pictures of kids in bathing suits, but there was no really understanding why you're doing that. There's no real explanation. There was nothing really to it, right? And so what I sat down is I asked this client, I said, "How does the POCD prevent you from living your life the greatest way that you want?" And the client said, "I really, 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 really love being an uncle. And I miss my nephew and I miss my niece, and I haven't seen them in 2 years because of the intrusive thoughts. And I miss it so much. I want to get them a gift. I want to show up to their events. I want them to know that I care." And I said, "That's what we're going to do in treatment. We're going to go to Target. We're going to get them both gifts. So we're going to go to Target. We'll walk in the kids section. We'll get gifts. You're going to be triggered because there's pictures of kids on the box. But let's work up to that. Let's look up the boxes on our phone. Let's kind of talk about the feelings and emotions that came up." We started with that. We went to the Target. We then went to the Target when it was busy. We bought gifts. The client FaceTimed their nephew and niece, and then eventually met up with them, and watched them. And the client was like, "I always thought ERP was just me kind of doing things to make me feel uncomfortable, but I really learned that what it is it's to fight back for the things you care about." So that's all I want to say to you, Ken, is just make sure you're getting it done by a provider that has done this and can morph into the kind of provider that you really need. I don't know if you have any comments, Liz, as well.
Into one of the things you said, Chris, that we did a live stream, and not a live stream, goodness, and IOCDF conference talk, the online talk with Callie and others, is we don't have to accept our worst fears as being true. When you made a comment and I made a face of writing a script that said things like, "I am a pedophile, I want to be with," neither of that isn't treatment, right? You aren't a pedophile. You don't want to do those things if this is POCD, right? And so why do we need to accept those worst case scenarios? We don't need to accept that my mom is dying and something bad's going to happen, but instead it's about not fighting the fear, right? So the fear of what if something happens to my mom, it doesn't mean I need to spend all day imagining my mom's dead. But I do need to be able to not spend all day trying to fight the fear that she might be dead. And so what I have to do is kind of say like, oh, like that's a crappy thought. Don't want that thought. And I have no control over it, or no control over what may or may not happen. And I'm still going to choose to live my life despite the fact that I just had that thought, or despite the fact that that could happen, right? Like my mom could die one day. But that's what's a really important piece, is that we're not accepting our worst case fears as true. No one's going to want to do ERP, me included. Like I'm not in it. I'm not willing, if that's what you're asking me to do. But it's actually about, can we accept the uncertainty and take the risk that everyone else takes in their life? We just have to do it a little bit more knowingly, because we can't do it unknowingly, because OCD is already there, right? It's already loud. We can't just, ignore it or suppress it. And are we making sure that we're not ignoring or suppressing our fear? If we do, it keeps popping up and it keeps fighting us. I do love your question, and I think it brings up a lot, or your comment about ERP, it brings up a lot for Chris and I to think about in the new year, is what are a lot of the live streams. And one of the things I would love to bring guests on. And I would love to just hear, I wish we could just somehow like let y'all come live to have an interactive conversation. And maybe we can through another platform. But I would love to hear when people say like, I hate ERP, or I'm not willing to do it. Like, I want to hear why. I want to hear about it so that I can better learn what else we need to be talking about and thinking about. So Ken, if you're willing to share that with the foundation, maybe you could write it in to info@iocdf.org. It'd be great for us to know and to evaluate.
I think that's really well said, Liz, and I think that's awesome. Another pre-submitted question said, I was diagnosed with OCD years ago, and I am very severe and homebound, specifically with contamination. My question is, do you know why disability, I'm thinking like SSRI and stuff, doesn't take OCD seriously, and how do I approach it if I need that help, so they know and understand severity? So if there's a client that's hopefully trying to get treatment and get on their feet, but needs some assistance, I know we're going to be doing a talk. I wonder if that's maybe something that we should save for Fred Penzel's talk. But
we're planning to do a talk early in the new year where we're going to talk about navigating the system across the board for insurance reimbursement, treatment, what to do, how to kind of navigate it when out-of-pocket private pay may not be something that's feasible for you. So we will certainly be talking about that. I think in general, there is just so much that needs to change around the understanding of OCD and OCD disability and everything else. I also would push you that I want you to not be disabled by your OCD, and I want you to not have OCD at a severe level. And so are there ways that we as the foundation can help support you in getting that freedom back so that disability and severity doesn't impact your life because of OCD?
Yeah, well said. And make sure to come to that live stream. Always can go to iocdf.org/peace of mind. And what you'll notice is that we really discuss and open up about what are the live streams coming up. So we're going to do one to talk about that. And you could submit some of these questions and topics. Another pre-submitted question was, how does somebody work on OCD when it is focused on a particular individual that's in their life? So let's say somebody's OCD is on their brother or their parents and they live with them. Like, how does somebody work with that OCD?
So I'm going to actually let you take this one, Chris. I was going to read it to you because you're throwing them all at me.
Oh, no worries. What I think is difficult about this is obviously OCD is a lot about control. And when our OCD is around an inanimate object, it's really easy to kind of like, in those really tough moments, just be like, I'm going to throw this away or wipe it down. But when clients come in with this particular fear, it's really hard to force an individual to live a lifestyle that is cohesive with the OCD. So what I mean by that is, like, if a client has emotional contamination, I'm working with a client whose brother has emotional contamination, so they can't touch any of their items, not because they think that's germy, it just makes them feel like they're going to morph into their younger brother. And it's like, my client's trying to set up like cone zones and different bathrooms. And, the problem is when your OCD is fixated on somebody who's in your life, because OCD would never pick somebody who lives in a different state because it'd be out of sight, out of mind. The mistake we all make with OCD and control is we try to force that loved one into submission to live in a lifestyle that makes you happy and makes you not feel anxiety, but that's just not logical. And sometimes what then happens is the person retreats or they avoid that person, and the other person feels sad. I mean, a lot of times parents will come in and say, my son won't hug me because they feel like I'm contaminated, or my daughter won't hug me because she's having intrusive sexual thoughts around me. And so once again, what I'd sit down with the client and say is like, do you miss this family member? Do you care about this family member? And are you happy about how this has turned out? And if the person is like, no, I see value in it, what I'm going to do in treatment is to work to get them reconnected, to really show them that the only reason they're fearing their loved one is because of the lies the OCD is telling them. So the good news, and the reason I like exposure and response prevention, is it isn't have to be relearned for every subtype. So what the treatment's going to ask you to do is, this person isn't disappearing from your life, they're going to be there. So the treatment is really to say, let me regain my relationship. So I'll just be authentic. I had intrusive sexual thoughts around my aunts. And so what my treatment really was is I would see them at family events, and I made sure that when I went to family events, I'd go up to them, I'd hug them, I'd have a conversation with them. Did I have intrusive thoughts and urges and sensations? Absolutely. But I learned that I don't need to respond and give in to them. And I wanted my relationship with my aunts back. I'm Greek. It's a crime not to love your family. So what I found over time is that I really regained that love and admiration for them. I spent time with them, and I was able to dismiss the lies that OCD told me. So it absolutely can be done.
I love that so much. And that actually is what I want us to go to next. We've got 10 minutes left, and I want us to talk a little bit about our goals for 2023 for our viewers, and what we hope that you gain both from our talks, but from the IOCDF, but really from treatment and for yourself. And so I'll go first, Chris, and then I'll let you take the lead and wrap up. But as I was sitting here reading y'all's comments, and I was reading the questions, and if we look distracted, Chris and I are always doing that at the same time and writing in the back end what to pose. One of the things that I sometimes feel like I hear is, I'm struggling. Like, I feel like a lot of us get stuck in this place of white knuckling, where we're functioning. And a lot of us know that, like, we can have really bad OCD and we can function, right? But we're kind of surviving, and we're functioning, and we're accepting that as the life we have to live by having an OCD diagnosis. I myself was there for many years. I was at a place where I believed that having OCD meant that I would always struggle and that I would always suffer. And this was kind of my burden to bear. And I just had to accept that. I am here to tell you that is not reality. Not any one of you needs to accept suffering, struggling, or pain because of your OCD. Do you need to be willing to accept discomfort to get over your OCD? Yes. Is it going to be hard? Is it going to be challenging? Is it going to be different and sometimes sound crazy? Yes. But it can get you your life back. And once you have your life back and you're at a place of freedom, those OCD fears, the things that you avoided, the things that we were so afraid of, are something we're willing to approach. And we're actually willing to approach it with a smile on our face, because you will have so much self-compassion for yourself and pride, and also excitement that you can do these things that OCD once robbed you of. And for some of us, it robs us of simple things: taking a shower, picking out our clothes, choosing what food to eat. And to have freedom in that is what you deserve. And it's what I want you to fight for. My goal for 2023 is that every one of you watching is able to get the resources, the tools, and the support where you can truly experience glimpses of freedom from OCD. Once you have one glimpse, I am confident you keep fighting for total freedom, because you realize it's possible. And what I want you to hear me saying and Chris saying is, this isn't fear factor. It's not an expectation that treatment is just like rigorous and difficult and this like battle forever. It is for a little, because we're doing things totally different. But once you start to do treatment all the way and you lean all the way in, you will achieve freedom. And freedom isn't just that we can do what we want. Freedom is that we truly no longer are bound by the fears or obsessions that OCD throws at us. And freedom is also where we get to a place where we actually have confidence in our own thoughts and what we believe, instead of questioning it because of OCD. So we actually get more insight. We don't have to be, okay, if I have pedophilia OCD, I have to live my whole life unsure if I'm a pedophile. No, I can with confidence tell you I'm not a pedophile, despite the fact that I've struggled a lot with pedophilia OCD in my life. But I can tell you that because I've done the treatment, and I'm no longer crippled by the fear and anxiety of OCD. If I was, I would still be stuck and confused about whether or not I may or may not be a pedophile. Treatment will give you relief. Treatment will give you freedom. And Chris and I don't fight for that for ourselves. We do a little, but we fight for all of you every day. And this is why we do what we do. And we hope that we can be a part of your journey towards freedom. Chris.
Yeah, I mean, beautiful, Liz. And I hope everybody listened to Liz. I mean, obviously, my heart goes out to everybody who chooses to work in this field and treat OCD, but my heart double beats for people like Liz who have lived this and can speak not only from all her clinical background and research, but her lived experience. And so, if you've never seen Liz fully speak, please, anytime she's speaking at an event, go because you're going to learn so much. I always learn so much, and I'm seen her a million times, but it's always great to be on a live with her because I just think that she eloquently says it. I'm going to, I had something else to say, but I'm going to kind of, hopefully this will more so be like the salt and to Liz's pepper, or peanut to her jelly, or whatever, because what I was going to say just didn't feel cohesive. But what you just said, what I first of all, the live streams with Liz this year, because we're doing a holiday next year, but this is kind of our last, just Liz and I live stream of this year. I think obviously, I've loved it. And I think the most appreciation I got from it was when Liz and I were at the conference, the in-person conference. We had so many people coming up to us and saying, "Oh my God, I've been watching the lives that you do. Thanks for asking my questions. Thanks for getting me resources. I felt very alone. And you guys have been a voice that's really, really helped me not feel so alone during this pandemic." And Liz and I do this as a labor of love because we both didn't have as many resources when we were first struggling. And we are just so happy there's so many more options out there. So first and foremost, thank you to all of you that keep coming in each week, that ask questions, that pre-submit. It's been an absolute honor that Liz and I love to do that. Absolutely. And our main overarching message is that you can get better. I mean, I always think back, it's like, I can't imagine, there hasn't been, and I can't imagine there ever will be something that impacted my life more than having OCD. It impacted my decision-making, my belief in myself, my identity, and it completely took me from who I once was to nothing. I mean, I became a shell of myself. And it was the treatment that got me to fight back. And I'm so fortunate I found someone who understood OCD, who treated it correctly through the IOCDF. And I never felt like treatment was fear factor or punishment. Instead, what I felt my therapist did is guide me with tools and techniques to get back to living the life that I always wanted to live. And now I can say, every day waking up, I am so proud of my younger self for making those difficult decisions to kind of leave the OCD behind and do the treatment. And that's why Liz and I do what we do, is because we're on the other side and we're like, we promise you all, if you just push through, if you listen to us, if you listen to your therapist, if you listen to all the different talks that you can access through the IOCDF, you can get better and you can live a fulfilled life. I think one of the things too is, a good friend of mine I call him Steven, but Twitch, from So You Think You Could Dance. I've had the pleasure of knowing him, his wife, for a decade, and his children. And obviously, as we know in the news, unfortunately, Twitch is no longer with us. And it really sobered me up. It really kind of had me recognize, I mean, this is someone that I just saw this year. I saw him multiple times. I spent time with him, his wife, his kids. And it reminds me that life is short and we only get one life to live. And I think that my dream, the day that I take my last breath, is that I look back and I really, really live in a country, in a world that takes mental health as seriously, so we don't lose people and people don't suffer. So if you're watching from wherever you are, I hope either this live stream, the words that Liz just said, or maybe one of the future ones is that stream that's going to motivate you to get the help you need. Because I promise you, suffering alone and in silence and without help is not the way you want to put your time on this earth. Instead, Liz and I can be a testament to what the treatment can do for you. So thank you as always for coming out. We appreciate the time that you give us.
Absolutely. And Chris, you are a guiding light to so many, myself included, and such an inspiration. Your words and your quotes, people always talk about them and say them. So I really want us to think about that highlight wheel or reel or whatever you call it in today's world, where we can put quotes, put sayings. But, Chris and I have a lot of sobering moments. And I think for us, it's just across the board getting to to see that potentially some of our words make an impact for you guys, and that's why we do this work. So our goal again is that in 2023 we help you get closer to freedom. Our ask is that you help us, let us know how we can do that. Please let us know. You can go to iocdf.org/peace of mind and submit questions that you have, content you want us to cover, things you're confused about, things that don't make sense, so that we can be sure we are helping you the way you need help. Thank you all. We love you guys. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays, and we will see y'all for our final live stream with the whole group of advocates next Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time.
And don't forget, go to iocdf.org. No matter where you are on this planet, there is international help as well to get all of your OCD support. And we wrote down all the questions. We'll make sure to get to those in future lives. Go to iocdf.org/peace of mind. And lastly, thank you so much. And we will see you back next Wednesday. It'll be all 6 of us. So come hang with us for the final live stream of the year.
Bye, y'all.